All right, what's happening, friends? Welcome back for another episode of Waynecast. I'm Rob Johnson. Chris, who is normally my co-host, is on, not vacation, but just got back from vacation, so he is slammed. So joining me is a suitable replacement, we'll call it. We're being charitable today. Is one of my best friends in the whole world, Robert Johnstone. What's up, man?
Hey, man. How you doing?
Good. And what's unique about this episode is it's on the Riverside platform. So you are in our Louisville office, and I'm actually at my home office. We were going to do this studio to studio, but
we
just didn't work out today. That would have been
our first studio to studio collaboration too, right?
Yeah. Yep.
We'll make it. We'll make it work one day.
We'll get it done. So what's up?
Not much, man. We just got done recording some podcasts, and we had a really, really good podcast launch yesterday for a Why the Trades podcast. Super happy about what the team collectively has been able to put together for that, from just the strategy, the artwork, that cover art, how that's evolved. It's beautiful. And then Cleland himself, that party was fun yesterday, and he's really doing good things. So yeah, and we're just keeping busy down here, just pumping out content, pumping out podcasts.
That's cool.
Yeah, for sure.
So I know for this episode you had a direction that you wanted to take it in, so I will turn the reins of guidance over to you, and we'll move on from there.
Well, yeah, I can make that work. I do have some good bullet points, so yeah, let's discuss that. So one of the main things we get a lot about questions about is just other marketing opportunities you could do to promote your podcast. With Speakeasy Podcast Network and Wayne Media, we have some really good content marketing options as far as what we can do in the studio to break up your content a little bit, put out a good scheduled release, really help with those social media channels, and as well as just the ongoing strategy. But there's just some things that, hey, the podcasters themselves, they have to touch. And I know that you're getting questions about that all the time. I'm getting questions about that all the time, and we're both researching. So, I just wanted to open up the discussion and kind of put some tips out there of what else our podcasters should be doing, to promote their shows outside of posting on social media. And, of course, releasing the shows on the different platforms.
Yeah, no, it's a good topic, and it's one that I was recently invited onto one of our other podcaster shows called Welcome to Livingston. And we talked about kind of this very topic of how to start a podcast. They highlight a lot of businesses in Livingston County and kind of tell their origin story, and it's a really neat show. But in that episode, they had asked if someone wants to start, what do they do? And whether it's marketing or even in really life, this is the same principle you should apply to everything, which largely is figure out what you want the outcome to be and then work backwards. So if you have a podcast and you want the outcome to be more sales or more networking or new relationships or whatever it is, you need to work backwards from that and figure out what's going to be the best platforms or what's the best levers you can pull to get there. And when it comes to podcasting, you need to figure out, well, what is the overall goal? So like for this show, Waynecast, my goal is to just meet people, talk to people, and network. And to do that, you need to have a mechanism for getting guests. You need to have a mechanism for scheduling, and you need to have consistency in that platform. And for a podcast overall, you need to have things like obviously branding and saying this is what our cover art's going to be. This is how our socials are going to function. This is what platforms we're going to be on. And once you have that down, you just stick to it, reassess, and make changes as you go along. But there's so many different things you could do as a podcaster. You would really get lost if you tried to do them all. If you tried to do transcripts and a fully functional website, and you have to scale it down to how much time do you have, and then what platforms can you be on and execute on that well. And that's the biggest mistake podcasters make, is they want to try and do everything and they end up doing 10% of everything, which looks like a half-ass attempt because they could have done 20% of all of that and done it all really well and looked very professional, but instead they tried to take on everything and they looked terrible.
Absolutely. I love that you mentioned too, just reverse engineer from the beginning. I think that's one of the most important parts that we're coming across with our podcasters is especially if you want to accomplish something with your podcast, whatever that may be. If you don't know what it is that you want to accomplish, it's going to be really, really hard to, get on the right road, with the proper vehicle, where you want to be headed, Yeah. If your goal is to go west, but you don't even know it's to go west, you might end up all the way east. So
Yeah.
I think that that's important.
Yeah, I feel like when people start a podcast, they have a really good idea and they say, hey, I have a podcast and I want it to be on this topic. And that's where it starts and ends. There's no more to that. And that's why it was funny. We've been working on this masterpiece project for a few months now.
Oh, I thought we were going to wait up for that part.
Oh, I don't care. I've been telling everybody it's not a big
Okay,
deal. So, no, it's fine. This will probably get we're going live December 1, and this will probably go live right before that. So it's not a big deal.
Well, tell us a little bit about Masterpiece real quick.
Well, yeah, so basically it's using this platform that we're on right now, Riverside, and taking all of the engineering and architecture that we've developed around Speakeasy and putting them together. So what I was going to say is an anecdote to this and kind of how this solves the problem is I've been looking at a lot of other companies that do virtual editing and kind of their platform, their procedures, what they're doing, just so I can assess the competition a little bit. And in doing that, if you have really good advertisers, you get retargeted. And so I've been retargeted with their advertisements as well. And I've had a chance to read them and read some feedback. And one gentleman had commented on one of these competitors of ours. And he said, wow, you charge $500 a month for all of this. You had me at the services, but lost me at the price. And $500 a month is not a lot of money in the context of audio production and, distribution and things like that. And that's kind of the main thing is like they're always going to have somebody in a certain classification that's going to balk at pricing or balk at this or that. But when you actually look into the amount of time that it takes to execute a show well, and then you look at how much time you as the podcaster could have spent doing something else to make money in your field or to make money or to just spend time with your family or whatever that time is worth, $500 to $1,000 a month is a nothing burger in the context of that because you have all of the professional aspects of that show being put together. And podcasters miss that. They miss what good show notes look like. They miss what a good distribution schedule looks like, how social media implementation should be handled. And in those things that they miss traction with every mark that they miss. It's kind of like if you take one of the rivets out of a gear of a clock and every time two of those rivets touch, it skips. The more and more rivets you miss, the less and less accurate that clock is going to be. Mm-hmm. And podcasters miss this a lot, and that's why they lose traction, and that's why they never grow.
Yeah, very interesting. I had this question I was going to ask you, but I just kind of got lost on the clock analogy. I was thinking about one of my favorite podcasts, Shittown, because of it. I know you've listened to that one. Now I'm thinking about John McElmore. Yeah. So I think like one thing I was going to ask you in particular, when it comes to these different types of goals is setting the proper path for the podcasters in their daily interactions too. Before that, I love that you're mentioning like, hey, yeah, everything on the technical back end, it's going to take time. It's a lot of time. And you really, if you're going to get into this, into podcasting, you need to definitely value your time and recognize outside of podcasting, like, hey, what's my time worth? If I can be promoting myself with this show, for example, which is going to really, really help in my marketing and what we have discovered can be repurposed on so many different things. We have a good chart in a presentation that I put up often, that goes over like what you can do with a 15-minute podcast, how you can break up the videos, how you can break up the sound bites, how you can, put these into proper paths. But the time that you're going to save from the editing is super, super important. And, from good production, it's really helpful. But with that being said, leading into that question, there are still some things that as the podcaster, you need to schedule yourself for weekly, at least to say, hey, here's some good ways to prepare myself for my upcoming show, both to get ready for it. So I am producing good content. And then also too, to get ready for the following weeks and get ready for launch and to get ready to, if you have a goal, for example, to build your audience, making sure you're taking these steps daily or weekly or whatever it may be to do. And I'd be very interested to hear your feedback on that and what kind of supplementary things you think podcasters need to make sure that they're doing weekly.
Well, I think a big thing that they need is a team around them that they can bounce ideas off of. And that's one thing that's really unique about us as a company is, we can provide that and kind of be a sounding board to what's effective, what's not effective. But even if you don't have that, if you don't have a team, it's really important to have just people around you that you can say, hey, what do you really think about this? Do you think this is a good direction? And the more feedback that you get and the more minds that are at the table, the better the direction is going to be. And this is kind of a podcast by community, because a podcast is never successful with one person at the helm, because that podcast needs listeners to survive. It's kind of like, no company ever has survived without sales. So there's no one person companies ever, because there needs to be customers in that funnel. And podcasts are the same thing. You need listeners in order to make it effective. Or else you're just talking to yourself. And, that's a mental disorder, in most cases. So you don't want that. But I think it's really unique when you have, a new show that's starting up and seeing how all those pieces come together, and how it's really a podcast by community. And the more people that are significant players in that, the better it's going to be.
Yeah, I really like that you mentioned that. It is important. Your community, your audience, ultimately are the people who, when it comes to the content, the people you want to listen to the most. They're going to be the ones to tell you the direction that you should go, and what they want to hear, what they want you to talk about. And that's really, really important. If the same people continue to come to the table and they're asking like, hey, we'd love to hear this from you, because number one, they're granting you authority. If they're asking those questions, they're looking at you as the expert, and they want to hear your opinion. And if you see that commonality, if you're paying attention, as you should be, and if you're asking questions to your audience members, then that can really, really lead you in the right direction for content and for growth, if your goal, for example, is to continue to grow your audience. And if you're listening to your audience and you see that the numbers start to rise, then, hey, you're doing a good job.
Yeah, and the other thing on the numbers side is I tell our podcasters that don't even concern yourself with numbers in the beginning, because numbers are just a representation of how many people have pressed the button to listen to the show. It doesn't represent the amount of people that have engaged with the show. It doesn't represent the community of the show. And it doesn't represent just the amount of people that have a vested interest in your idea and what you're doing. So while, yes, it's nice to say, hey, I have 1,000 downloads on this show, like that's impressive and that's nice.
What is that? That's like top 1%. People don't realize it, but that's getting 1,000 downloads per show is no small milestone.
It's certainly rare, but the bigger number is how many people have actually engaged with that show, how many people have actually done something about your message. And that's what I look at as the hallmark of a successful podcast, is how vested are the members. And there's podcasts that I know that people have never heard of that have more engagement on their audience than national shows like Joe Rogan, Corolla, but their audiences have so much more investment in the show. Rogan is bigger, but other shows have a bigger community. Yeah. And that's what's interesting about podcasts, is it's not just a numbers game.
Well, how do you recommend for, as I mentioned, there's stuff that we can really, really help a lot of our podcasters with, from content development and actually having a good schedule. I mean, you have to have a good schedule to make this work. But what are some ways that you're telling podcasters, to nurture that community, to engage with them? What are the steps? What are you recommending?
There's really only one step, and it's transparency. Like, what is the ease of someone to be able to access you as a host? What are you giving them to be able to go and do after the show is concluded? Is it an email? Is it social media? Is it SpeakPipe, which is a voicemail platform where people can call in and leave voicemails? You can play it on the show. What is that that you've given your audience to participate? One of my favorite podcasts is called The Minimalists, and on that podcast, they have recurring segments where they take questions and voicemails from their audience all the time. And that's another show. They have an extremely committed audience, but they're not one of the top 100 podcasts in the nation. But if you could measure audiences in that top 100 format, I would suspect they would be right up there, because they do things like that. They invite people to leave voicemails. They give feedback. They make the audience a part of the podcast, and that's huge.
Yeah, I think it's so important to continue to address your audience in your podcast when you're when you're recording. I love that idea. I'm always recommending to podcasters, to get on your channels and talk with people. Don't just wait for them to ask you the questions or make the recommendations, but engage with them, not just through your content, but by coming up there and being like, hey, this is what I have going on in my life right now. These are some of the things I'm going to want to talk about. But also, what do you guys want to talk about? What's new and pressing to you? I'm a real estate podcaster. What are you concerned about that we can cover? And if you're not asking those questions, if you're not engaging with your audience both on your episode, in your intros and your outros and in the middle sections to ask those questions, to, essentially some sort of call to action for engagement. And then you're also not doing it on your social channels. You're going to miss a lot of opportunity to really build some really strong relationships.
Absolutely. And one thing that I think a lot of podcasters miss is the casual nature of a podcast. Mm-hmm. So yesterday I did an onboarding with a new show that's coming on board, and these guys are phenomenal, but they are very professional, buttoned down people. And they want to have fun on the podcast, but they were wondering, well, what mechanism can I use to get people to kind of pay attention to this show? And I was like, well, here's an idea. So they want to talk about, Livingston County and being 100 years old, and not the county being 100 years old, but their 100-year-old company history, and, pull up photos. And I said, well, you have Johnny in the engineering booth. So why don't you say during the podcast, hey, Johnny, pull up that picture from 1907 that I gave you. And let's look at that. Like, bring other people into the show. And I said, you don't got to make Johnny a part of the show, but I'm saying that is, you don't need to be like, all right, what verbal cue or what sign language am I going to give you to pull up this clip? And it's like, stop that. Like, this is not a full production television show. This is not the newsroom. You're not going to be like, okay, now back to you, Johnstone, and we're going to cut back over there. Like, don't do that. That is the worst thing you can do for a podcast, because no one is going to engage with something like that. So make it casual, make it personal, make it raw. Like, if I like just 10 seconds ago when you were talking, I was choking to death over here, and I came back, looked at I was crying. So luckily I know how to cut a podcast, so we're going to be able to shop all that out. But
maybe we won't.
Maybe we won't. my point was, I know I can have coughing fits because you're going to be on the screen while I was doing that. So
it's funny. If you noticed, you were looking at me because I was laughing about. You're probably like, what's he laughing at? Not your coughing fits. I was just thinking about something that happened in the studio today with one of our great podcasters. We have some really good cues between us, because I'm in the engineer's booth and I'm making sure that everything's running properly. The sound's good. I'm trying to get people close to mic, but I noticed the camera angle is off. So I put it out to make sure that there was a moment when the guest was talking. I knew she was in a long point, and I snuck in here and I ducked under the camera, and then I put my hand up and I pushed the mic out of the way while Jason was talking, because it was like right in front of his face. And then he just started laughing his ass off. He's like, you scared the crap out of me. And I'm like, it's like there was a demon exorcist on the floor. You might as well come in through the ceiling. And I'm like, okay, well, this is going to be a lot today. He's like, no, absolutely not. We're going to leave that in there for sure. So,
and that's what makes it good. And that's the cool thing, is like, what is the goal of the podcast? If it's to build a community, if it's to build people that want to follow what you're doing, you are a real person who makes real mistakes, who does human things. And those human elements, the more they're a part of a podcast, like, I get it. Like, sometimes I say stuff on a show and I'm like, let's just cut that out. That was a long rambling point that has nothing to do with anything at all.
For sure.
Like, that's fine. But don't turn yourself into, a robot. Don't Zuckerberg yourself during a podcast and just seem like a complete, android that has no emotions or feelings. And I'm sure Mark Zuckerberg has feelings. I like him quite a bit, actually. So we'll see.
He lights up for barbecue sauce. Lights up for it. But no, the one thing I would say on that is, once again, these are all goal dependent, but among the vast majority of it, you want to maintain your structure and, of course, what you're talking about, or kind of have that theme within your personality, within your topic points, within your general direction. But two, also making sure that you have consistency on the front end and the back end is important when it comes to structuring these things out. Good intros and outros can go a long way by announcing to new audience members exactly what you're doing. And then also too, what actions they can take afterwards. So I do think that that's important.
And I wonder, I think about this a lot, like how important is an introduction in terms of new audiences? Because I have some people that say, hey, I want like a 30 to 45 second intro that goes through our entire company history. And I'm like, well, that's kind of too long.
Yeah, it's too long.
And then you got people that are like, hey, here's the name of the show. Here's what we do. And in less than 10 seconds, we're in. And that's kind of more where I lean.
I think so too.
And I even like, the Joe Rogan style of we're starting the show by just talking. Like we're not introducing anybody. You might hear the name of the person that's on the show and that's it. Like there's no, hey, Gilbert Gottfried was on his show recently,
I saw that.
which was weird.
Yeah.
It was real weird.
I haven't listened to the whole thing yet, but
he's a real weird guy. But he's funny.
Did you expect him to not be?
Well, I just expected, I thought the voice thing was a shtick. I didn't think that was how he actually sounded. So 3 hours of Gilbert Gottfried is a lot. It was funny because he was talking about Aladdin, and I'm like, why is he talking about Aladdin? And it was like, oh, because he's the parrot. And I forgot about that.
That's right, isn't it?
Yeah, and I forgot about that because they were talking about Aladdin and like these weird requests they'd get from parents because, the different dialogue lines that were in the song. I was like, why is he talking so much about Aladdin? And then he's like, I was the bird.
Yeah, why is the live?
Were.
Sorry, I'm upset right now because you brought something close to my heart. But why are the live action Disney movies getting rid of the animal characters? Like they had no problem making, Simba and everybody talk in The Lion King on that, carbon copy turned into a digital movie. But then in Aladdin and in what's the other one that they recently did where they got rid of the dragon?
I don't know. The dragon.
Yeah, on starts with M.
Oh, Mulan.
Yeah, they got rid of like one of my favorite characters of that entire movie. Why'd they do that?
I don't know. I've never seen the cartoon Mulan. I've seen the new one. I haven't seen the cartoon. So,
well, there used to be a dragon in there that would talk, and I don't know, kind of struck a chord because Disney's kind of getting rid of some of the main characters for the sake of realism.
Did the bird not talk in the new Aladdin?
Now I'm trying to think. I didn't think he did.
He did. No, he did because he did. He did the squawking like. Because he did like the whole, stranger in the compound thing. He talked.
Did he have like the full conversations that Godfrey had in the Gilbert Godfrey had?
That I don't know. I don't remember.
I need to rewatch that. Anyways, Mulan's mostly the one that struck a chord with
Disney
me.
Birds.
Just dragons too. Let's not forget the dragon. Anyways,
no, I gotcha. Yeah, that was. I don't know how we got off on that tangent, but that's a great example. We just showed you guys about what a real sidetrack in a conversation looks like. So you're welcome for that. But yeah, with Rogan talking about intros, like you might get a name. You just might get, hey, this is Gilbert Gottfried, and what's been going on with you. But it's not like here's an origin story or tell me about your life from childhood and beyond. Like the podcast can be whatever you want to make it, which is why it's a free form. It's an expression of art. And anytime you're creating something, it's an expression of art, and that can look like whatever you want. And one unique tactic, I don't think we've talked about Johnstone, but we have some virtual podcasters that are starting, and we were doing the consult, and they said, well, what's the best way for people to get to know us? And I was like, don't tell people what you do. Like, let them be excited. So episode 1, I said, what if you just introduce the show and you just said your names? You give a quick introduction to what the show is going to be about, and then you introduce your guest, and then you carry on. And then at the end of the show, you tell everyone who you are and what you do, because people aren't going to care about a new show and who the hosts are until they care about what you have to say. So you're going to earn much more credibility when you say, you give the knowledge, you give the value, and then you tell them who you are and what you do. And that's what I've been doing in my last few speaking engagements is I've been going up and talking about what they ought to be doing on LinkedIn from a realtor perspective, and then telling who I am at the end of the talk. Because no one cares who Rob Johnson of Wayne Media Group is, and me going into this very long bio at the beginning of a talk. Most people don't even know who I am.
We care about you, Rob.
I know you do. I know you do, but the audience doesn't. They care about what I have to say on the topic that they came for me to present on.
Yeah.
And then once they realize, oh, wow, this guy does kind of know what he's talking about, then at the end, you can give the bio and the credibility and the, what you do and how you do it. That to me is a really unique way to get people vested in you as a podcast host is to give the value up front and then talk about who you are at the end.
I do love that. Absolutely. Like, you almost could essentially set yourself up for a trap too, because then people are thinking too much about your accolades and looking for maybe even a gotcha moment.
That's a great point too. Yeah.
So I like that idea. Like, and there's a mystery to it too. Like, there's no prejudgment. You just know a guy's talking to you or a girl's talking to you, and they're talking to you well. And then when everything wraps up at the end, it comes together. You're like, oh yeah, well, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah, because how many times? Right. Well, how many times have you been to a presentation and like someone gave the accolades up front,
the elevator pitch, yeah.
Well, yeah, and they give the talk, and during the talk, you're like, damn, who's this guy again? Like, he was really good, and then at the end, you're like, you kind of missed who it is because he did that at the front, but you started to become more and more invested in that person's thinking during the conversation, and then you really wanted to know who it was and how you could learn more, or read a book, or do whatever it is.
Yeah, 100%. How do you set the hooks, though? What are some unique ways that you do that? Setting the hooks up front. You know, like that reason to stay compelled and to stay.
Well, a lot of it is looking at, like, when I give, like, the last thing I did was I talked to Keller Williams about, like, real estate and LinkedIn. And they came to hear about LinkedIn. They did not come to hear about me. So I opened the talk by saying, here are the 3 things most of you are doing wrong on LinkedIn. And now they're like, oh, wow, so I am doing things wrong. I am invested. I am listening.
Well done.
And then you go through that and you say, here are the things you ought to be doing. And then you get to the end. And, you know, luckily we had people in the audience that were already Speakeasy clients or Wayne Media clients. And they actually unprovoked got up at the end and talked about how great everything was that we do. And then we got like 4 or 5 new leads just from that talk, which was not the mission. My mission was to go there and not sell. And we didn't sell, but we ended up selling anyway because it was all passive. It was all casual. It was all just value driven.
I mean, that's the best type of selling is, you know, people don't want to, there is so much noise. You know, I was happy right before this too. I did a little seminar with Jordan Clemens from GLI, and he was talking about some LinkedIn stuff too. We'll eventually get you guys connected, but there's so much noise out there. Like, the last thing that you want to do is get any type of pitch whatsoever. You know, you have to lead with value and end with value too. And then if people want to work with you, it's because they really appreciated what you did. And you don't need to go and start with the sale up front.
Yeah. No, I hate that. I hate that because it's like, if, you know, that's my biggest problem with sales overall is everyone that wants to just jam all this information down someone's throat about what we do. And there's not a single second of someone asking, well, what do you want to do? What are your goals? Tell me about what you do. And then my job is to listen to that, configure it, and put it together in a timeline that makes sense for you, where you can envision yourself as the client in that position. Mm-hmm. Like, that's the job of sales. It's not to pressure somebody, and, you know, the more pressure you apply to somebody, the more nervous they're going to get. And that's not a good way to get information and being able to structure something that's of long-term value to them.
Yeah, 100%. I love that. Yeah.
So I think, go ahead.
No, please.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think as the last thing on that thread of like how to hook people during the presentation is like, you really need to think about, well, who's coming to this? What, if you were in the audience, what would you want to get out of it? And what are some takeaways that they can have so when they leave, they can do something about what you said? Not
just in the terms of like a in-person presentation, but we're talking about within the podcast too.
Absolutely, yeah.
Importance of, you know, leading. If you were doing, let's say, I think, you know, obviously 2 different audiences, definitely a business to business podcast. Your audience members are looking for more of a educational approach. Once again, you don't want to draw them out. So just as you were saying with the presentation, you should probably have a hook that's very similar to hey, here's the 3 things that you're doing wrong, right? Or, hey, here's the 3 things that we're going to fix. I always loved my Marine Corps days. We called it a WIFM, a what's in it for me. And, you know, one of the most important things if you were starting a period of instruction was to provide a WIFM. You know, something to say, hey, there's a good reason to stick around for this full episode. But you also don't want to beat it down into them with, like you said, a long drawn out introduction of here I am as the expert and here's what I do and here's everything that the podcast is about. And now we're 3 minutes into it and we haven't even begun to discuss why you actually came here today.
Yeah.
So
exactly. And that's the ultimate thing. It's like, why are you giving a presentation? Is it to like, if everyone is honest with themselves, like when I go and give a presentation, it's for two reasons. One, I really want to help that audience learn more about media, even if it isn't them coming to me for services. And two, I want to keep building my reputation as somebody in our local community that can help a business owner on those fronts. So yes, there is a personal gain there, no doubt. But my overall mission is to correct a lot of the bad habits that marketing professionals, and I use that word very loosely, and these gurus online use for their bullshit master classes. And it's just not, it's a narrative that I'm desperately trying to correct, especially with small businesses, because they fall into these traps, waste a lot of money and lose a lot of ground. And that's why a lot of them close, is because they were misled.
That's good stuff. A few more podcasting questions.
Yeah.
I never know what time and how long we've been doing this already, but I was going to ask you, like, what's something that, podcasters, whether they're with us or wherever they're at, what's something that they should be doing every single day?
Well, every single day, I mean, for me, and I don't know if it's a daily thing or just a every other day thing, but certainly a few times a week, they need to be thinking about new content. They need to be thinking about show direction. They need to be thinking about what went right, what went wrong on the last show. They need to be a student of their own podcast, essentially, and really think about what different ways can they improve. And also note that not every podcast needs to be, up for a Pulitzer Prize, right? Not every podcast is going to be this amazing gold nugget of wisdom, and that's okay. There's some podcasters I've encountered that are very hard on themselves, and they have this very high expectation that they need to be perfect. And that's not, again, to me, that's not a part of the art form. Like, perfection is not the goal. The goal is consistency. The goal is growth. And it's kind of like with life. Like, you're never going to hit a peak point of perfection. The goal is to, every day go out there and learn, make mistakes, learn from them, and carry on. And that's exactly what you should be doing in a podcast. I mean,
podcasting's a lot like, if I can bring something from my personal life into the mix, it's very much jujitsu. It's the same thing. Some people are going to be Brazilian jiu-jitsu, by the way, if you don't know what this is, it's kind of sweeping the nation. So most people do, but it's a form of martial arts, a combative grappling, submission-based martial art.
Intimate hugging.
A lot of hugging, a lot of pajama fighting. It
does look like a lot of pajama fighting. It's like one thing you guys are missing is like pillows and a VHS.
We bring the pillows sometimes.
I'm sure
VHS,
you do.
No, not so much. Mostly the
ZV
ones over there too, at all the jiu-jitsu gyms. But no, it's with jiu-jitsu, some people are going to have some more natural talent, right? But they're going to get still worked by the black belts, and it's not because they're doing anything wrong. They're actually doing all the right things. They keep on coming every single day. And the only way that you get better at jiu-jitsu is you come every single day that you can. Not every single day, you'll tear your body down, but get that consistency within your schedule, right? I went too many times in the beginning. But get that consistency with your schedule. That's a point, by the way, to not overdo it. But get consistent with your schedule, and you will get better. Like, if I'm upset at myself when I was a white belt because I'm not, performing the perfect technique, and I end off of that, then, well, I know I'm never going to get good at jiu-jitsu because I quit it because of the disappointment with myself. But if I keep on coming in every single day and working on my technique and being, just happy with improvement rather than with perfection, then eventually those points of perfection are going to get there.
Exactly right. And that's the thing, is like you want to keep trying to hit up to a higher level. And when you want to do it in a way where you don't burn out, you need to be able to pace yourself. And being able to pace yourself has really nothing to do with what you're doing in the moment. It has everything to do with how you're preparing for the next show. And one of my barometers of like, here's what a good podcast is there not an endless cycle of content, but is there a big cache of content that you can use to keep the show fresh, right? If you're doing a niche podcast on, all the different Coca-Cola bottles from 1947, like, that's going to be a very short show. But if you're going to do a show on the history of Coca-Cola, you have some time. You have some podcasts there, and those are two very different things. And those are things you need to think about when you're doing a show. And that's where we've, I think, added a lot of value to people on the podcasting front, is being able to sit down and say, no, this is a bad idea, because you're going to burn out. You're going to lose a lot of traction, because you're not going to have a lot of good things to talk about. And then you're going to need to turn the show into a completely different direction, which is going to lose the few audience members you did have. So it's a good landmine to avoid stepping on.
I like that. I was going to ask a question, just because I get these questions a lot down here too in my day-to-day conversations. I think it is important, just as we'll make a search engine optimization analogy here, right? When somebody calls you and says, would you like to be number one on Google? That's a very, very long game to play.
Sure.
What they're most likely selling you is paid advertising, right? And they're just kind of misconstruing the facts of it. But for search engine optimization, to be number one on Google, it's a long play, especially in competitive areas for your particular industry or service that you're offering.
I want to put an asterisk on that real quick, though. And then we'll get to this real quick. I know you got the question, but the other thing that SEO people do when they call you and ask you to be number one on Google is they will find the easiest keywords that look like it's a keyword that you would want. And then they can rank you for those very quickly, because no one's bidding on them for a very particular reason, because there's no search volume associated with them.
That's a very solid point.
So they'll either say, hey, if you're, plumbers in Lakewood subdivision, it's like, well, who in the hell is searching for plumbers in a subdivision? Nobody. Mm-hmm. But I can show you that you're ranking number one for a plumber-driven keyword, and that's supposed to have some type of merit with you. And it's just another, we call it black hat SEO tactics, that I'm just not a fan of. Not a fan of.
As you shouldn't be. But back to it, just using that comparison, what I was going with there is, like, it's not going to be tomorrow. If your goal is to build an audience, it's definitely not going to be tomorrow, unless you already had extremely large and extremely active and extremely engaged network of people, a community beforehand, a personality prior to you starting this journey to become a podcaster. Those will help, obviously. Your content still has to be good. But regardless, it's not a tomorrow game. It's a down the road, keep on moving. Eventually we'll go to it. But we do get those questions a lot, like, hey, what should I be doing outside? What should I be doing? I do have the goal of growing an audience. And what are some, little things that you would recommend to those who are trying to stay consistent with coming into the studio, but also consistent with getting more and more listeners each week? And this is if they have good content. Yeah. I think the number one focus has to be the content.
Yeah, for sure. And content consistency, the roadmap, all that, the goals, all needs to be forefront. I would say that if someone is looking for different ways to grow, look at other areas that are in public places that have a congregation of people that would be in your audience. So the most simple example would be, if you are doing a religious podcast and you were talking about, the Baptist denomination, perhaps you could send out blasts to Baptist churches and have them feature your podcast at their denomination. If you're doing a podcast on, barista, which would be a very weird audio podcast, it seems like a visual art form, but you could.
Hey, we're doing a tattoo podcast.
Yeah, but it's not about tattoos, though. It's not about tattoos, though. It's about the conversation that's happening while I agree. If it was a tattoo podcast, that's not it, though. But my point is, if you have a coffee-driven podcast, look for communities locally in your area that are coffee-driven people and find a way to get in front of them. Maybe it's a open mic night where you do a 10-minute monologue that you would do from your podcast. You tell people you can listen more here. Maybe it's bulletin board with a QR code where it links to the Apple Podcast app. There's just a lot of different things you could do if you're trying to get in front of more local communities. But the biggest thing that you can do is set up the podcast, set up the content, go on Facebook, open an ad account. Once you have that ad account open, you find a graphic that you really like for your podcast or a video from it. And then you target your audience. So if this is Waynecast, I'm targeting business owners entrepreneurs and college students between the ages of 20 and 45. And then my delivery link is the Apple Podcast app, and I'm only targeting Apple iOS users. Mm-hmm. So advanced targeting for
80% of listeners, but that's going down with Spotify, right?
Well, I mean, yeah. I mean, the game plan is to target anyone that's an iOS user, because when they click on the app, the podcast app is automatically installed on everyone's phone.
Good point.
And if you have an iPhone and you click on the app, it's going to open it up in the Apple Podcast app. And you can target only mobile users. And if you're targeting mobile users with iPhones, that link is going to work every time. So there are really advanced targeting tactics you can use to grow a podcast. And we've done this all the time. It's a very simple way to grow your audience. And then you can segment that out. Say, hey, I really want to grow in Kentucky. I really want to grow in Missouri or Iowa. You can grow in audiences from subsets as the show goes on. And it's not that expensive to do that.
No, it is not.
It's just something, it's another tactic that you can use to get your show in front of more people. And that's where you really need to make sure your content, your ask, your delivery, and your community values are all there. That way that person is sticky and they stay listening to the show.
Robert, something that you said earlier that really kind of sounded great to me, I think that is worth expansion, is that local presence first. Even if you have a goal of a national podcast, I think that we're so used to, with this new environment that we have that's so tied in digitally, that everybody starts thinking about, okay, well, how can I get this spread across the United States or across the world? And they might not realize how much their audience is located around them. If you're in a very, very small town, for example, it might be a little bit different, but their audience is around them. And if you expand outwards, I think that there's a lot of great opportunities you can catch up to instead of trying to expand everywhere. What do you think?
No, I agree. I like the local aspect for podcasting, largely because it's really easy to get community buy-in. And whether you're looking for sponsorships or just networking plays, there's really easy ways to tap into a local market, because local people typically want to support local people. So if you have a local effort that you're making and it's honest and it's laid out well and it's organized, people want to be a part of that. You know, we're getting ready to organize kind of our first religious podcast on the network. And it's largely just talking about spirituality and all how that comes in many different shapes and sizes and formats. And while it's not my show, it's a show that we're putting on the network. And they're talking about how can we get community buy-in, and the most simple answer is be transparent about what you're doing. And when you're transparent about what you're doing and you can articulate that to different community players, they're going to want to be involved. They're going to want to invest or sponsor or be on the show or share it when it comes out on socials, because it's a part of their community and it's something that people are interested in. That's the best way that you can get community buy-in, and that's why I prefer local to regional podcasts compared to national ones, especially if it's dealing with a local effort like a business or a hobby or an event. That's where I think you get the most buy-in from people.
Yeah, I love that. I think, even from case studies that we've had here, we've had the podcasters who might have started out by, having a big, robust goal of, national donors or national audience or national, reach, right? And that's kind of what they came up on front with, but they realized that they didn't have those connections yet. And then they kind of reverse engineered it and started looking, okay, well, who can we work really well with locally? Well, you'd be surprised to what degrees of separations, how short they are, because now that they've tailored their podcast first locally, they're starting to build a national audience and the national recognition from it, because their community here is the people who connected them to the next community outside of their own.
Yeah, and that just goes to tell you like how much. We can talk about, Zoom meetings and kind of the lack of relationships going away and things moving to be more virtual. And I don't think that's ever going to be the case. And if you want a clear example, look at a local podcast and see how many people want to be involved in something like that. They want to go do something like that. Mm-hmm. They want to be a part of something where they're in relationship or in community with people that have a similar mission. And that's why these groups, these networks, these shows that are happening at a local level are so important, is because it gives people something to be invested into in their community. and it allows someone from the consumer perspective to curate their media to their liking. And I think that's the most unique thing about podcasts is you don't have to have a mainstream 4-channel news system. You can curate your media really well, and you can do it all on your own, which is my favorite thing about podcasting.
I love that too. I want to kind of talk about a couple things with Facebook in particular, but I'm going to start with this on that local level. One thing that I've noticed that's good for a few of our guys down here is there is, especially in a city like Louisville, for example, there are a ton of different local business groups that people are really, really engaged on. And groups, different from the pages. Most people are on Facebook are parts of some groups now at this point, from professional groups to I'm part of a group that's called A Place Where We Pretend to Be Boomers. And it's just, it's comedy, right? But you're really well in line with some of the members of it. And I do think that making sure that if you're involved, number one, we never sell. We always provide, right? That goes for all the podcasters too, but you can really get involved with that local community by being involved with Facebook groups and by making sure that your content is on there and that you're engaging with people on there with the right pieces of content. I think that that's a cool way, especially if there's an event coming up, to kind of get yourself ahead and be like, oh, I know that guy. He's posted videos of himself and his podcast and all those different things. And now he's at this big event, and you actually have some recognition in that community from it. I think that that's really cool. So what I was going to say about Facebook, because I wanted to kind of hear what you're thinking about all these different things. We're not talking about Facebook. We're not talking about metaverse today. Sure, that will come up in the future. We did talk about Sweet Baby Ray's dough, which we can always do that. But I do love, especially as more and more people are getting on it with how Facebook is changing the way for podcasts by having the embedded feed. Having the subscriptions there, having it directly, with notifications, and how you can tie in your analytics now with, because historically podcast analytics have been kind of crap, right?
They still are. Yeah.
What do you think Facebook's going to do with that? Do you have any projections?
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone is going to kind of get into this phase of realizing how important it is to be able to track audio habits online. And I think the best platform that I've seen that can track audio habits is Audible. And Audible does a really nice job of tracking time over listenership, over book, over genre. And granted, that's a self-contained platform where listeners have to log in to use it. It's not distributed across multiple channels, which has largely been the issue with podcasts. But it is a model of like, oh, this is how this can work really well, and this is how it should be. But what I think is going to happen in the next 3 to 5 years is you're going to be able to see a concatenated system that is solely for analytics, that can track everything that's happening on each and every platform. And what's happening is there's this primary and secondary tier, when it comes to hosting. Primary platforms would be Apple, Spotify, and Google, and iHeartRadio, the really well-known streamers. And then the secondary channels are everything that pulls from those other platforms. So we talk about this a lot, how Reason and Radio FM and all these, secondary and tertiary platforms, our podcasts that we put out on Speakeasy end up making their way down there because they pull from the main feeds. What I think is going to happen specifically with Facebook, and they're doing the best job that I've seen of any social platform on the integration side, is they're going to be another distribution channel. Yeah. They're going to be another distribution channel, and they're going to build communities off of this. And this is why Facebook will continue to be the most successful social media platform, because they understand change and they are doing things actively to modify their platform to fit trends. Yeah. Right. Instagram did that really well with Reels in a response to TikTok. And Facebook did this really well with audio groups in response to Clubhouse. And they're taking all of those things and putting it together into one platform where people can get everything that they need from one source. It's kind of like the Amazon of social media. Well, yeah, for sure. And they're going to be really successful with it.
I think LinkedIn is, from the professional standpoint, I think that they are catching up, though, in my opinion, to seeing all the changes that they're making and the purchase from Microsoft. Correct. Yeah. I'd be interested to see if they're going to follow suit and, incorporate more audio trends, because audio trends are not slowing down at all.
No. And I think what's going to be a fad is when people are saying like, I have a Alexa sitting next to me, so I won't say the word. But people are talking about how that and Google Voice and Siri and all these different platforms are going to be the next thing, and they're not. Like, no one is ever going to want to talk to their phone or talk to a device as their main source of communication. Like, that's just not going to happen. Like, it's a convenience thing for sure, but it's not a social platform, and it never will be. You can mark my words on that. And that's why I thought Clubhouse was going to die. And Clubhouse is going to stick around. It's not going anywhere. It'll probably get, absorbed and whatnot, but it's never going to be a primary platform because no one can do anything about it. And until they fix that, it will never be primary. And Facebook is just eating their lunch right now because they're taking what people really liked and what was unique about it and integrating it into a platform where there's already 2 billion users.
100%. And I'll tell you what, Clubhouse definitely needs some work. I hate when I accidentally hit one of their notifications. Now I'm just playing audio no matter where, no matter if my phone's on mute, everything like that. So, and it's it's like, hey, you're either there or you're not for those conversations. The lack of interaction on them it's boring.
Yeah. And what I'd like to see, what I would personally like to see is a paid podcasting platform that is sponsored by Apple or Spotify or Google, where you have to pay to be listed on that platform, but the users are all free. Because this does two things. One, it weeds out people that just create a podcast, do 3 episodes, and drop. And also, as a part of that platform, as long as you pay your subscription, your episodes are live. But when you don't, they are archived, not deleted, but archived. And I think this would be a really unique platform. And Apple is moving towards this way, but it's mainly with subscriptions. They're kind of doing the Patreon model of, you can opt into this and the users pay for it. But I think it'd be a really unique platform because then you'd cut out a lot of the nonsense podcasts that are out there that do 2 or 3 episodes from Ray's basement and, they're never heard from again and they just cloud up the algorithms and it's just a lot,
Yeah, it allows the quality, consistent, meaningful, intentional podcasters to actually get heard.
And Stitcher Radio, credit to Stitcher Radio, because they were the first platform that I know of that did this, and then Spotify followed suit. But what happened was Stitcher said they've reached out to a handful of shows that are really great, and they said, do you want to come on this Stitcher Premium model, and you'll be exclusive to our channel? And then people would have to opt in to hear your shows, or they could listen for free with advertising. And that really started the model of exclusivity with podcasting, which made big headlines when Rogan signed his deal and Michelle Obama signed her deal. And, all these really big names started to have exclusivity on platform. And that's a good thing. But there also needs to be a lot of cleanup done on some of the other shows. So that way, like, to me, if a show is sitting dormant for, 5 years, they need to go unless it's a serial or something that was unless it was like produced a seasonal with the intention of being a season. Yes.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's not going to happen, but it's just a way that I think of, like, how can we clean up all this mess? Because there's over, 1.2 million podcasts in existence, but less than a quarter of them are active, so it's like, how do we clean up all of this and partition it in a way where algorithms favor consistency, and they do, but just favor consistency more than stagnation.
There's a bunch of cassette tapes in the road right now that aren't being played.
That's
for
right.
Sure. There are some good. I would have to say I'd like to see how you manage. Like I found a podcast yesterday that was basically a sleep podcast.
Yeah,
I can't remember the name. I wish I would have had it because I would have given this guy some props. But he basically softly narrates the storyboards of Office episodes and turn it into like sleep stories. It's like some really unique, fun, artistic stuff like that is cool. And, it's seasonality on those types of podcasts. He has a lot of episodes that you can cover. But, yeah, there definitely are the short ones that you want to take care of, the one-season shows that are important, like S-Town.
Yeah, S-Town, Serial, there's a lot of them that just did one run, and they're great. Mm-hmm. And they should stay there.
They're a movie. They're a movie rather than a season.
Yeah, but, it's crazy what podcasting is going to turn into, and we're just in the beginning. Like anyone that's like, well, podcasting is a fad. It's like in certain elements of it may very well be a fad, but the core mission of podcasting is just getting started, and that by 2 things. One, There's no successful application that has mastered video integration with podcast streaming from a hosting platform perspective. And 2, there is terrible mechanisms for analytics and user audience feedback.
Mm-hmm.
And those 2 things are going to keep developing. And as they develop, so will the platforms and so will the engagement on those platforms. And we're just in the infancy. We're just getting started.
And what I love about the most, maybe this would be a good point to end on today. We have a meeting coming up soon too, for a short time. But
that's right, we do.
We do, yeah. But I do love, as much as we've just talked about some pretty, techie future trends that kind of, encompass podcasting at a macro level, right? What the most powerful thing is the accessibility to the micro level in the communities that we talked about earlier. I'm not just saying this because it's kind of what we do. There's a reason we went in this direction, is because this is the most affordable, holistic marketing option for small businesses that I think that anybody's come across. Just how much you can do with it, even at just the simple levels. I think there is a point to say, keep it simple, because there's a lot you can do with the simplicity of this platform.
Yeah. As a business owner, if I can go somewhere and spend less than 20 grand a year and get content and video and audio and have all of these elements working for me and a team that can help me in that right direction, it's a no-brainer. And we went the small business route for 2 reasons, one more important than the other. One is because I feel like it was a very underserved and taken advantage of community, and we wanted to add credibility to that, which I think we've done a really good job with. Mm-hmm. And 2, it's an easier market to entry than at the C-suite level, the corporates, and those people are very set in their ways. They have internal marketing. They have things that are already working for them. So this gives people the opportunity to start small, scale, and do really well with this platform.
And educate themselves too. I think that's
for sure.
super important to talk about. One of my favorite things to watch our podcasters do is they'll look back at their episodes. They'll find that moment of insight that was kind of buried in their brain, for example. And then they say it at the right time. And now they have that, if it's evergreen material, meaning that you can use it forever. But also from that very point, they're like, oh, wow, I can shape my business around what I just said here, what I documented in real time. And then I can also pull tons and tons of more content from that very, very topic. So I think that just the growth factor, not just from a marketing standpoint, but from a personal growth standpoint of getting into podcasting is maybe one of the most important factors, if not the most important factor, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, it's huge, and the biggest thing too is encouraging people. So if you're listening to this and you want to start a podcast, you got to be patient. If you're an impatient person, podcasting is not for you, because right now the market is so flooded with new shows. It's difficult to stand out, and the difficulty doesn't last that long. I'll tell you that. That's why we look at that 15 show barometer of like, if you can get past 15 shows, there's a really good chance that you'll stand out above the crowd. Because most people get 6, 8, 10 shows done, and then they fizzle, and it's because they didn't have a good plan. So there is a lot of shows that exist that have 4 episodes, right? And that's where they ended, and they're not picking back up. So be patient. It takes time.
Very patient.
It's like anything else. It's like the person that's like, hey, I ran ads for 1 month. Why am I not Mark Cuban? It's like, well, a lot of reasons why you're not Mark Cuban, but the main one is you're impatient. So be patient.
I like that. Very good. That's a good place to end. Anything we should end on, Rob? This is your show. I listen. I don't mind taking over the questioning part of it, but I don't know what you want me to do now. Okay,
I'll
take the mic back.
Sorry, I got you. So John Stone, 2022 is coming up. What are you most excited for?
What am I most excited about for 2022? Down here, particularly, what I'm most excited about is continuing to see where our 2021 podcasters end up in 2022 and how they've grown, because I think that's been tremendous. The relationships that have been built through that's what excites me the most. So looking back a year and see where they've grown is very exciting. I'm super excited for what we're going to be doing at a national level now with Masterpiece, which we can hit on some details too. But I'm also very excited to see in our particular market of Louisville now that everything is picking up traction and people are seeing this, to see how this podcasting community forms.
Yeah.
In this local network, through events, through getting other people, cross collaborating across shows. I'm very, very much looking forward to the network side of the podcast community. So 3 things.
Yeah, no, 100%. We call it Speakeasy Podcast Network for a reason. So
yeah, that's exciting.
Speakeasy Podcast Studios. The network piece is going to continue to be the biggest payoff, and not financially, just from a community perspective. I would say in 2022, the thing that I'm looking forward to the most is what we're going to be doing with Masterpiece. And I think that's going to be a complete game changer and an industry disruptor. And that, to me, is the most exciting, because we've laid a really good foundation with Speakeasy. We have a lot of good processes, procedures. We're going to keep improving. We're going to keep getting better. But I feel like the bulk of that org dev work is done. And now we have a good foundation. So now it's time to go into the cloud, upset that market like we did with the local market, and keep moving.
We need like a triangle-shaped business card, though, now.
No, they're
it's like separate. What's that?
So they're all separate.
I got you.
They got like a D&D.
Like a dice. That'd be pretty dope, actually. We need like 6 more businesses. So just start making them up so we can get the die.
We only need one more, because we can get a triangle, and there's just 4 sides.
Rob, what business are you going to announce that you haven't yet on this show today, so we can get a triangle-shaped dice business card?
I can announce one, because that was what I was working on before I had the idea for Masterpiece, and it's Wayne Capital. So that's
okay.
That's
the one
I've been working on all year. So that won't be around until like 2023 or so.
That one will always, if we have our cards sitting down, it'll always be at the bottom, because I
like that. It'll always be, you won't see it.
It's always the structure. It's always the foundation that's holding everything in place.
Yeah. I also have a really cool essential oil multi-level marketing company I've been spinning up.
Can I get my friends involved?
Oh, you sure can. That's the only way we can make money.
Do you take some of the commission or something? How does this work?
Yes. Yeah, there's an upstream and a downstream. And just like when you piss into the wind, you don't want to be downstream.
But this one's an inverted pyramid, of course, so it's fine.
Of course.
There we go.
It's like a pyramid, but we're going to turn it on its head.
It's a 3-dimensional pyramid now.
I like that.
There we go.
So you can get screwed from all the angles. All right,
maybe this should lead up front of this episode.
I like that. That's the hook.
There we go.
Like you came for the piss reference and you stayed for the podcasting.
Rob, I'm super happy I finally been able to get on this.
Cool,
we got to jump on that meeting, so let's go straight to it.
All right. All right, everyone, that's going to wrap up this week's episode of Waynecast. We got sales to make. Actually, I don't know if this is a sales meeting. We got things to do, though. So that's going to wrap up this episode. Appreciate you guys listening. We'll catch you on the next one. Take care.